Hi, so we'll be discussing the um, true or false questions from Winbaliada's basic accounting textbook, particularly on the topic recording business transactions. There are 15 items in this discussion. Obviously, these are not all that there are in the book, but we'll try to discuss each item comprehensively so that we can have a better grasp of the concepts underlying the topic regarding recording business transactions. So let's begin. Number one, amounts entered on the left side of an account, regardless of the account title, are called credits or charges to the account. This statement is false. And the reason why this is false, because we have established that in our accounting equation, the left side of that accounting equation is actually the debit side, while the right side is the credit side. And that translates to the T account or the ledger of the specific accounts, regardless of what element they are. So whether they are an asset, liability, or an equity account, the left side will always be the debit side and the credit side will always be the right side. So the answer is false. Number two, the accounting cycle begins with the recording of the transactions and ends with the preparation of the financial statements. This statement is also false. The reason why this is false is because the accounting cycle actually begins with the identification of events to be recorded. And the aim of this step is to gather information about transactions or events generally through the source documents. Or in other words, we in this step or it is in this step where we identify if a business transaction is actually an accountable transaction. So if meaning to say, if there's a need for the accountant to record the business transaction in the books of the business, it is very important to note that not all business transactions are accountable events or accountable transactions. And if it is not an accountable transaction, then there is no need for us to enter or input that transaction into the books. A very good example would be the hiring of an employee. Although that is a business transaction, at the time it is not yet an accountable transaction, and so it must not be recorded in the books. All right, so that is the first step. The second step is the recording of the transaction in the journal or in the book of original entry, but that comes later. The last step is actually the preparation of a post-closing trial balance and not the preparation of the financial statement. Although you would notice that there is one additional step after that, but that step, which is reversing journal entries, is actually an optional step. It is there to simplify the recording of certain regular transactions, but you can choose to omit or skip that step in the accounting cycle. So the answer is false. Number three, an expense may be recognized and recorded although no cash outlay has been made. The answer is true. And the reason why this is true is because of the principle of accrual, where we are allowed to recognize income when they are earned and not necessarily when cash or money is received. And at the same time, we are also allowed to recognize an expense when they are incurred and not necessarily when money was disbursed. And speaking of the expense component of the principle of accrual, you can actually recognize an expense even if you have not paid the cash yet. A very good example of this would be the recording of utilities bill, or in particular a water bill for a given month. So you record the amount of expense that you incurred for that month, but you do not necessarily pay that bill at the end of the month. In fact, it is normal practice that you pay your bill a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks after the end of the month. But nevertheless, you have to recognize the expense because it is something that you have already incurred and will be paying later on. And obviously, there is no cash movement yet, but you need to record it. And to do that, you need to debit an expense and credit a liability. Again, there is no cash movement, but an expense has been recognized already at this point. Number 3 is true. Number 4, withdrawals of assets from a business by the owners are considered to be expenses. This statement is false. And the reason why this is false is because withdrawals are obviously different from expenses. Although they are both components of our equity element, and they both decrease the total balance of our equity, but they actually are very different in the sense that withdrawals directly decrease your capital account or your capital investment, while expenses affect your equity by virtue of its behavior towards your revenue or your income. So it decreases your income, and whatever is left of your income after deducting your expenses, whether that be net profit or net loss, that would be close to your equity account. So it affects your equity account, but it has to be absorbed by your income first, whereby withdrawal directly reduces your capital investment. So no, withdrawals are different from expenses. The answer to number 4 is false. Number 5, recording an account with a debit balance as a credit or vice versa will cause the trial balance to be out of balance. The answer is true. It is true because the account must be recorded in the correct column, whether debit or credit, in order for your trial balance to remain balanced. If any of your accounts will be recorded on the wrong column, meaning to say if it should have been recorded on the debit balance but you recorded it on the whether it should be recorded on the debit side but you recorded it on the credit side, then that would cause your trial balance to be out of balance. And this is a very good example of this principle. So on the first presentation of the trial balance for CR7 perfumes, you would see that both debits and credits totaled 124,649. So your trial balance looks good based on this observation. But on the second presentation of your trial balance, you would see that your total debits are now lesser compared to your total credits. If you get the difference, you would realize that there is a 60,000 gap between your credits and your debits. And normally, in order for us to determine what the cause of the error is, one of the first things that we would do is to divide that difference by 2. Especially in this particular case, we're getting a 30,000 amount. This would give us a clue whether any of the amounts that has a 30,000 balance was posted erroneously on the wrong side of the accounting equation. And true enough, we would see that the drawing account of Ronaldo was recorded or was posted on the credit side when it should have been recorded on the debit column, thereby causing your trial balance to be out of balance. So yes, the answer is true. If you record an account with a debit balance as a credit, or if you record an account with a credit balance as a debit, then this will cause the trial balance to be out of balance. Number 6, a credit always means an entry on the left side of an account. This statement is false. In fact, the contrary is true. Credit is always on the right side of the transaction or of the accounting equation. What's found on the left side is the debit column or the debit side. All right. Number 7, every business transaction affects a minimum of 2 accounts. This is true. Okay, as long as the business transaction is an accountable transaction or an accountable event, then that transaction, under the principle of double entry system of accounting, must affect at least 2 accounts in our books. All right. Um, so the double entry system of accounting states that every transaction has causes one account to be debited and another account to be credited, and thereby maintaining the balance of the accounting equation through and through. Number 8, the process of recording a transaction in a journal is called classifying. Obviously, this is false because this definition actually pertains to journalizing or simply recording. So when you record a transaction in your journal, especially if we're talking about the books of original entry, then what you're actually doing is journalizing. You are recording a transaction or entering a transaction into the journal or the books of the company. Number 9, an increase in an expense is recorded as a credit. This is false because an increase in expense in fact is actually recorded as a debit. Although expense is a component of equity and equity has a normal credit balance, expense actually behaves in the opposite manner, whereby increases in expenses are recorded through debits and decreases are recorded through credits. Needless to say, expenses reduces or has a negative effect on our owner's equity balance, and that explains why there is a opposite treatment on the increase and decrease of these two accounts or elements. Number 10, recording 52,000 is 520 is an example of a slide. This is true. The reason why we call it a slide is because there seems to be a slide of the decimal point from one place to another. So 52,000 has the decimal point after the last zero to the right, but since we recorded it as 520, it seems as if the decimal point has moved 2 places to the left, thereby the use of the term slide. The answer is true, and if we by any chance commit this error, then it might affect our trial balance, and obviously it would affect the correctness of our records of our of the transactions that we recorded down to the preparation of the financial statements. It's very important to be very cautious and very careful in recording business transactions, especially when looking at the amounts and putting them in the books, starting with the journal and then going through the entire process of the accounting cycle. So yeah, this error is called a slide. Number 11, debit means increase and credit means decrease. This is false because debit can either mean increase or decrease. The same is true for credit. It could mean an increase or a decrease. It depends on what element and what account is being debited and what element or account is being credited. So yeah, it can either mean increase or decrease, but that purely depends on the element or the account that we are debiting or crediting. The answer is false. Number 12, the sequence of the account titles in a trial balance depends upon the size of the account balances. The answer is false. Normally, the sequence is based on the numerical code that you can find in your chart of accounts. Now, if that is not available, then you would notice that most trial balance are presented in a way where balance sheet accounts are listed first, followed by the income statement account. So you would notice in our example that it began with cash, which is an asset, which is a balance sheet account, down to Diaz withdrawals, which is an equity account, which also is a balance sheet account. After that, we have 3 more accounts that are income statement accounts: consulting revenue, salaries expense, and utilities expense. So no, the sequence does not depend on the size or the amount of the account balances, but normally they depend on, or they are sequence based on the numerical code that are assigned to each account, and that can be found or seen in the company's or in the business's chart of accounts. Number 13, double posting of a transaction causes the debits and credits not to balance. The answer is false. Double posting will not cause your trial balance to go out of balance as long as both debits and credits of the same transaction are posted twice. So in this example, we recorded a purchase of office supplies where we debited office supplies and credited cash for 10,000. As long as both office supplies and cash are posted twice in their respective ledgers or T accounts, then that will not result to the misbalance of your or disbalance of your, then that will not result your trial balance to go out of balance. Okay, because double posting will only mean that you recorded the transaction twice, but that would still maintain the balance of your accounting equation. So no, that will not affect your trial balance as far as the totals of your debits and credits are concerned. Number 14, a listing of the accounts in a ledger is called a chart of accounts. This is true. And chart of accounts is most of the time exclusive to the business. And what I mean by that is the terms that you use for your account titles or your account names are customized to the nature of your business. So what that means is my chart of accounts for my business might not be the same to the chart of accounts of your own business, especially if we have different types of businesses and we're in the different industries. So what I'm trying to say is there is no standard chart of accounts for all businesses. It differs because accounts sometimes depend on the nature of the operations of the business. If it's a service business, or if it's a merchandising business, or if it's a manufacturing business, etc. Number 15, a recording error caused by the erroneous rearrangement of digits, such as writing 627 as 672, is called transposition. This is another type of error in addition to what we just learned earlier, which is the slide. This time, a digit in a given number was placed in a different position, and thereby creating a whole new different number, different from the original figure that we intended to record. The statement is true. This is indeed called transposition. That's the end of the true or false questions. Thank you.